I really started with me asking myself, what would I want to work on if I could only work on one thing for the rest of my life? And really being at the cutting edge of AI, which was still even very exciting back then, but it was more machine learning model focused. And now it's much more generative AI focused. I think there was just a lot of like drive for that. And I was like, if I could just work on this for the rest of my life, I would be so happy. And so that really like helped me pursue this.
How well are you leveraging AI and modern technology in your business, in your everyday life as a leader? And what are you doing to help your team get the best from it as well? We hear a lot about ChatGPT and other similar AI and large language models these days, almost to the point where it ceases to become useful. And if you're trying to apply it in a practical, useful way in your business, it's not always that clear. So my guest today is Denzil Eden, founder of Smarty with a Y, not like the sweets if you're in the UK. Listener. Smarty is an all-in-one AI productivity assistant. It helps you plan your best day every day. Denzil herself is also a trailblazer. She's a solo female technical founder, which is quite a rare thing in the world of tech more widely. She's carved out a niche with an AI-focused degree. She went to MIT, she went to Harvard, and had a distinguished career at Microsoft before stepping out to start her own company. And having started coding at a very young age, 8, I think I was just about reading at that point. I must have been. It's too long ago. I can't remember it. But anyway, coding at such a young age is incredibly impressive. And so it's no surprise that her company is going from strength to strength. So we're going to be talking about that journey. We're going to get into all of the tech stuff as well. We'll be talking about AI and the implications that has. We'll be talking about managing tech teams and leading in a tech environment, as well as Denzil's own experiences since she started her business. Going to be an interesting one, especially for all of those tech heads in the audience. Speaking of which, if you haven't done so already, pay a visit to www.leadernotaboss.com. Sign up for my newsletter, which is not as regular as it should be. I'm quite bad at the procrastination there, but it does keep you up to date with the podcast. We talk about some of the themes that come up in episodes, go into a bit more depth. You'll also automatically be invited to join the Integrity Leaders community when you sign up. And we're still running our 60-day complimentary access to everything the community has to offer, give you a taster of what's available, see if it's for you. If it is, that's great. You can become a subscriber at the end of those 60 days. If not, that's great too. At least we know, right? So you can either cease to be a member at that point, or there is a free forever option as well. So without further ado, let's welcome Denzil onto the show.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Denzil, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to have you on the show, and welcome to Leading with Integrity.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, you're very welcome. And I'm excited to get into the conversation as well. And on that note, introduce yourself. Tell the listeners a bit about your background, your career so far, what you do today, and why you do it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Denzil. I'm the founder of Smarty.ai. We are trying to be an AI-powered conversational calendar for small business owners and solopreneurs to capture everything on their plate so that they can plan their best day every day. We are creating conversational commands like Coffee with David at Blue Bottle in San Francisco at 2 p.m. London time, and have Smarty send a calendar invite to the right person with the right location with the right time zones. That's a conversational command in calendar management, but we're also making conversational commands in email management, task management, scheduling link management. So really trying to be this conversational executive assistant where you can have all of your administrative tasks in one place. The founder's journey has been a long and hard one for me. I used to work in big tech before, and I've also gone to business school. So I'm really happy to touch on anything you want to talk about, David.
So conversational AI then, what's the difference between that and some of the more well-known ones that people may have heard of?
Yeah, so today AI is really just a tool. It's really meant to help automate a lot of these administrative tasks that are that we face every day. I like to think of AI in general to be following three pillars. One, that it's personalized, two, that it's proactive, and three, that it's predictive. And actually, that's the wrong order. It's really AI predicts first using data from the past. It tries to predict what's going to happen next. And then AI is proactive. It can do those next steps for you. And then finally, it's personalized. It can know what your personal preferences are based on your personal data and then choose the right proactive step based off what you would do. And so really that's the same sort of principles that we're trying to bring at Smarty. In terms of conversational AI, there's obviously generative AI with LLMs, which is very natural language based. We started building Smarty pre-LLMs. And so we were still using a lot of different OpenAI APIs, but other also open source APIs that helped bring this conversational command. So it's really the same technology that you're seeing everywhere. And now it's how do you apply it?
Okay, that makes sense. And for anyone who's not technically oriented, what is an API?
Oh, great question. It's so funny. Like you don't even notice the jargon you're using until you use it. An API is like the language that different software speak, and it's a way for software to speak to other software. And so, for example, Smarty connects with the Google Calendar API or the Google Email API to give you that calendar and email experience. And that conversational layer is something that we build on top of those APIs. And my goal is that one day Smarty can be this hub to connect to all of the APIs of different online software so that you can use conversational commands to automate everything you do online. For example, travel booking.
Tell us a bit there. So you mentioned your founder journey was a bit difficult. Would you like to tell us a bit more about that? I'm curious.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I went to college to study computer science. But when I was in college, I was very much, I don't want to be a founder. That is not for someone like me. I don't really know where that mindset came from, but I was like, I'd much rather go to big tech and try that out. And so then I went to Microsoft, which I liked a lot. But I felt like it wasn't hungry enough for me. And so I was like, okay, what do I want to do? So I tried out a bunch of careers, eventually went to business school, and at business school really came up with the idea for Smarty. Really started with wanting the solution in my own life. I was just feeling very overwhelmed with everything that was going on personally, professionally, at school. And I really realized that everything that I was trying to do and that everything was on my plate could be easily automated with existing technology. And then this was back in like 2017, 2018. And back then, I think there were a lot of reports from Harvard Business Review and McKinsey that like 25% of the work that you're doing could easily be automated with technology. And today, it's really more like 60% can easily be automated with existing technology, especially with this whole generative AI movement. And so back then, I was like, okay, I want to build this solution for myself. So Smarty actually started as a chatbot where I would try to tell it tasks to do, and it would automate it if it could. But the pitch was not as palatable as it is today, because I feel like it was very much pre this AI movement. I pitched it to an investor. She said no. I wasn't able to raise money for another 2 years, and really just had to keep being persistent, kept hustling, kept iterating on the product, kept going back to the same investor and being like, look at the progress I've made since I talked to you last. And eventually, she wrote our first check, which was great. It was Pear Ventures out in California. And that really got the ball rolling for me. And now it's 2024. So it's been quite a long time of just keeping at it.
Yeah, I guess timing can be everything, can't it? And yeah, I mean, once it became a bit more well-known, I imagine that conversation must have gone a lot easier.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm a first-time founder, so I've learned a lot of really great lessons from the experience. And I think, yes, timing is everything. There's definitely like a huge hype and buzz around AI today. But I also feel like I didn't do the right things to raise money if that was what my goal was, or I didn't do the right things to really build a minimum viable company from a minimum viable product. And so there are things that you can be doing very early on as an aspiring founder to validate your idea, to see if it's going to make money, to like build up this validation to sell to investors and say, oh, look at all of the validation I have. So I didn't really know how to do that. And I also didn't, I just figured it out on the way.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if it works, right? I mean,
I mean, definitely, but it's also like, could this have gone faster? Probably.
True.
Yeah.
No, fair enough. And so aside from trying to solve a problem that was bothering you yourself in your own career and your own life, What was it that finally did motivate you to make that transition from being the engineer yourself to being the entrepreneur and founding that business?
I really started with me asking myself, what would I want to work on if I could only work on one thing for the rest of my life? And really being at the cutting edge of AI, which was still even very exciting back then, but it was more machine learning model focused. And now it's much more generative AI focused. I think there was just a lot of like drive for that. And I was like, if I could just work on this for the rest of my life, I would be so happy. And so that really like helped me pursue this. And I think that's really important when you're starting a startup, is to have that passion for a space and also just that commitment to a space. Because I think if Smarty failed today, I would probably go and work on the same vision, just at a different company. And so I have that confidence that, one, I believe this is the future of technology. And then two, this is what I'm passionate about, which sometimes is the only thing that keeps you going on days.
Yeah, I can certainly empathize with that. And so having that background as an engineer yourself, how has that influenced your approach as a CEO?
I think I'm a very logical thinker and I'm a big problem solver, which I think are such great skills as someone who is constantly facing new problems that they have no idea how to solve. But on the other side, I will say that being an engineer has also led me to one of my biggest pitfalls, which is build and they will come, because sometimes it is easier to build than it is to validate or do research or to sell or to market. And those are all really important skills. I love being a founder because it kind of forces you to learn all of the skills, but I am also a builder at heart. And I like to come back to building whenever I can, which I will say is probably not like the healthiest way to be growing your startup, but it might be it's a good thing in the middle though, once you have a validated idea and you need to build something.
Yeah, that's true. And it's something I've heard before and have experienced myself as well. You get lost, don't you, in that, whatever the problem is you're trying to solve, or whatever the technology is you're working with, or whatever the cool thing is. And you're like, wow, this is a cool thing. I want to do the thing. And then sometimes we forget.
Right. Which is tragic. And so save yourself the heartache and validate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But you're right, of course. I mean, once you know it's a good idea and that people want it, you've got to have that ability to actually implement. And I think I don't know if it's an overlooked skill, but it's quite often a missing skill in founding teams, isn't it?
Definitely. It's, I think it's really important to build the right team. It's definitely something that took me a really long time to, one, prioritize, and two, to realize how to build a great team. And that is some of my biggest takeaways from this founder's journey for sure. But I think when I first got my first check, even in that time, I was still very much like, okay, we have to build. Let's just find the first person that can help me start building right away. And that was the wrong choice. You should really choose carefully. You should find someone who's passionate, especially at a smaller team, at a smaller company, especially when it's just the two of you. You need to find someone who's passionate about the idea, who's committed, and who also has the skills necessary.
Interesting. There's a debate that's come up many a time in conversations with friends, with colleagues, on this podcast even, about when you're hiring, what's most important, which do you look for first, and if you'd only have one of them, which would it be? And that debate, I think, almost always comes down to personality and passion and fit, or whatever word you want to use for that, versus skills and technical capability. Now, in a tech-driven company such as yours, I imagine they're both important, but if you could only have one, which would it be? It's
so interesting. It depends on the role, because if you need a generalist for a role, then obviously I think, I don't know, obviously, I think at a smaller company, fit matters a lot more than skill sometimes. And like the willingness to gain skill matters a lot too. But at the same time, we're a very technical company. I need someone who is qualified to do it. But if you have two people that are equally qualified, I think at a smaller company, fit matters so much more, because it'll determine how long you'll be able to work together. And that matters. At a larger company, if you go to a company for 6 months or a year, that's a short amount of time, but it doesn't matter. It's not going to affect the company's bottom line. But at a startup, it takes so much time to train and get someone ready to work in your ecosystem. To have them leave after 6 months, it's a huge loss of time and wasted potential. And so it's really important that you hire the right person at the right time. And I think fit just matters a little bit more for that at a smaller team.
Yeah, that's usually the side of the fence I come down on as well. I think, skills can be taught, can be learned. And yes, I mean, there is a time versus cost trade-off as well, of course, because whether time is more important, you just need someone who's already qualified, but then you're accepting that's probably going to cost you more in the short term versus whether you're making a longer term investment. Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it?
It is. It comes down to the people, but I've really found that when you have a team that's committed to your vision, committed to what you're building, the quality is better.
Yeah, I think so. And I think if they believe in the idea and they want to achieve the same things you want to achieve, then everything else will come.
Yes.
Eventually, sometimes, but it will.
Yeah. This timing can be a little hard to predict, but exactly. Like, as long as you're all on the same page, things move a little smoother. There's more momentum.
Which is part of the burden of leadership, of course, is making sure everyone's on the same page.
The hardest part, for sure.
Having that experience and being a solo technical female founder in an industry that has a difficult relationship, shall we say, to diversity, how has that experience shaped your perspective on that diversity in that industry that has sometimes quite a poor reputation for it?
It's a really great question. And it's funny because I really used to not think about it that often. Because I've always been in like classrooms where I was like one or two women, or in high school, like I took AP Physics C and like I was one of two women in that class. And then in college, MIT does a really great job of having an equal gender balance, or close to it. But like going out into the tech field, like these teams that I was working on, especially on the software engineering side, there was only so many women. But it never felt like I was at like the forefront or I was the first woman at any point. And then now that I'm in AI, I've been going to more and more conferences and more panels where there are only male speakers. And I'm shocked because one, I'd never been so aware of the gender disparity before. And two, I know that there are women in AI. There's more women in AI than I think ever before. And so I think it's also just a lack of having a platform and exposure and having the right connections to be on the right talks. And so I think prioritizing showing diversity is really important in all aspects, not just gender, but also for everyone who is in that space and feeling like they're not being represented by what's around them. You have to just keep going, and you have to just remember, what are your goals? What are your communities, and cultivate those communities, cultivate your goals and ideas, and keep going. Just like anything else, this is just like one other factor, and you can't let it detract you from your journey. And then in terms of trying to change things, the best way I think to do that is, one, to seek out peers and mentors who look or give you the motivation or representation that you need, and then try to pay it forward and try to find those aspiring folks that you can help, that you can give the guidance and advice that you've had. I think it's really important to be at all times generating and cultivating a network at all three levels: people above you, people at your level, and then people below you who you want to mentor and help. And I think you'll find that there's always something to learn from all of them, and it's a different relationship in every case. So I think that's the best thing anyone can do to help get the diversity that they want in the future, if that makes sense.
It does. And one thing that almost always comes up, particularly when we're talking about gender in this kind of industry and this type of diversity, is, I mean, I've heard it a few times, I'm sure you've heard it as well, is the kind of the response from the generic senior manager. I'd love to hire more women in these roles, but none of them are applying, so it's not my fault.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that as well. And that's why I really think it's like up to you to generate the network that you want. You have to actively seek it out. You have to, because it becomes easier. Like once you have a few women or a few underrepresented folks in your network, you ask them, they know more people. It becomes much easier to like increase the funnel once you've started, once you've opened the faucet. And so it's really important for anyone who's interested in increasing diversity to actively be seeking it out.
Yeah, I think it is a tough one, isn't it? And you can understand why people default to that kind of response, because that's the path of least resistance, isn't it, effectively? But I think if you are serious about building that diversity, you've got to go out and find it. in a lot
Yeah,
of
you
ways.
have to be very intentional about it.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm always really worried about talking about fit, going back to what we were saying before, because fit can be so subjective, and you could be binding fit to very arbitrary parameters that aren't really important to your company's success. And so it's really important to constantly be questioning, like, what is fit on your company, and are you representing the values that you want to represent?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, another two kind of aspects of diversity that not a lot of people think about as well is economic diversity as well, is different economic backgrounds. I mean, gender and race and those kind of things are, of course, important, but I think so are the economic boundaries, but also diversity of thought, diversity of ideas.
Yeah.
Because if you get, remove all the other factors, if you only recruit everyone from the same university, say, they're probably all going to have the same economic background anyway, because they've all mostly gone to the same university, but they're all going to have been taught the same way. They've been taught to think the same way. They've probably done the same qualifications from the same teachers, same amount of time. And there's that aspect of it as well. And it's a whole kettle of fish, isn't it?
I completely agree. My team is very small, so like diversity, we are actually a very diverse team. And so it has never been like an active question that I've been thinking about, but I think it's easier because I'm already diverse. So it's like easier for me to build a diverse team. But I really 100% agree with the socioeconomic diversity, because that is so overlooked. And one, it's hard to choose for, but also I feel like a friend of mine, a business school friend, Gordon Ning, wrote the book, The Unspoken Rules, where like there are things that you just learn from how you've grown up, from like the exposure that you've had. And I think socioeconomic diversity is important because you need to actively invest in these communities in order to like see success. And there's so many rules that we never talk about that people are judged for in the professional world. And so how do you start cultivating those skills and mentoring those skills in young students before they even enter the job world?
Oh, exactly. And some of them are just so, those unspoken standards are just so ridiculous when you actually take time to think about them. Like, so the one for my generation when we were first entering the workplace was what you're wearing when you go to your job interview, and that's what you're judged on pretty much for the rest of the interview.
So subjective.
Yeah, and it's irrelevant. And then, I mean, another one that came out a few years later was whether you've got any tattoos, like as though that's some measure of your professionalism. And it's so silly when you think like how that has no impact on this person's ability to do a job.
The quality of work that you will be doing or bringing to the table. And I do think that's changing. I think this like TikTok and like social media, it's gone both ways. I think it's kind of like shown the extremes of either, of like no filters, nothing, and just being purely improv versus like all the filters, all the preparation. So it's a funny time. Like I do think like we are evaluating these arbitrary standards we've set and questioning them, hopefully.
Yeah, I definitely think there's progress. But yeah, I guess it's just they're two easy examples, aren't they, of some of the pointless, silly standards that we come up with when we're hiring.
Definitely.
So let's go back to AI again. In what ways do you think it's going to be changing the modern workplace?
I think AI is going to be a transformational tool at work, and not just software businesses, in every industry, in every business, every job role. And so I think it's really important for all knowledge workers today to really be working on their AI literacy. So that doesn't necessarily mean understanding how AI works on the back end or understanding like why it does what it does, but rather AI literacy to me means understanding how to use AI tools that are already out in the market. I think we're in a very nascent period. There's a lot of change that's going to be happening in the next 5-10 years. And the more time knowledge workers invest today in learning about the AI tools that are out there, the more of an expert they'll be in 5 or 10 years, because every job, every role is going to be affected by AI.
Yeah, it feels a bit like a kind of analogy to the old sort of factories and production lines and the robots taking over the jobs, all that kind of stuff, doesn't it? And if you can't move with the times, yeah, maybe change career.
Well, I think it's going to like affect every career. So I think it's inevitable that you will have to learn it, and the sooner you can learn, the better. And I think for anyone who's listening who wants to increase their AI literacy, I think the best way to do that is to take something you're passionate about, a hobby, and really start there, because then you'll be driven to continue working and learning about it. And so if you're a photographer, Think about like AI photography tools that are out there. If you are an artist, think about Midjourney and submit your own art styles. Try to get inspiration from it. If you're a writer, of course, use all of these writing tools that are out there and try to see, okay, can you build an LLM based off your own writings? Can you find a tool that already does that and you submit your own writing? Like anything that is your hobby, composing music, there's so many AI music composition tools out there now. You can submit your own samples. You can create new samples. I think there is going to be a huge synergy between AI tools and the knowledge worker that is using them. And so I think this is a great time to take your passions and explore it. And then you'll find by the time it comes to your job, you're going to be so on top of how to use these tools, how to prompt them, you'll know how they think, which will be complementary to how you think.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on it. Definitely. I think, so what would you say to the people who are worried they're going to lose their job to an AI, or say people in creative industries who are worried that creativity, that aspect that makes them unique is going to be replaced by just soulless copies of other people's artwork, for example?
Definitely. I hear that. I definitely think there is a lot of regulation and governance happening right now around copyright. I think that's very important. But for all of the artists that are worried that AI tools will take over for them, I definitely don't think that's the case, because even now you can start to see like what posts were written with ChatGPT on LinkedIn or on social media or on Twitter. It is obvious because it's all based off previous data. There's no true creativity or true authentic newness to any of this work. It is based off past data. It's like if an artist was looking at past influences and trying to understand and be inspired to create something new. I think the real magic is in this human AI partnership where you are providing new ideas and then using AI to refine them, to iterate on them at a faster pace than ever before. I think that's really what is going to become the future of a lot of these spaces. And I guess I'm very optimistic. I'm an optimistic person when it comes to AI, but I do think the future is really around that partnership between AI and humans and what we can build together. In terms of folks who are worried about jobs that are being replaced by AI, I do think that's a real concern. There is definitely going to be a short-term cost when it comes to what AI can do and what humans are doing today. But I think in the long term, AI is going to be creating more jobs than ever. Prompt engineering jobs are going to go through the roof. There's going to be so many new fields that we can't even imagine today that are going to be created because of AI. And I think that is why investing in AI literacy is so important, because if you're ahead of the curve in learning those tools and learning those skills, you'll be ready when those jobs open up.
If you don't fancy that, just focus on the people-oriented skills like leadership. There we go. Great.
There's things that AI cannot do, computers cannot do. But I do think, it is like the Industrial Revolution. Certain jobs were taken away, but if you learn how to use the tools, you set yourself up for more jobs and better jobs in some ways. And it's the same thing now. It's like using the internet. If you didn't learn how to use the internet, you were going to be left behind as the knowledge working space moved forward. And so I don't think you have to be an expert in AI. You don't have to be an expert in how AI works. But you need to be able to understand how these tools think and how you can leverage them.
Yeah, I suppose it's no different, is it? The internet is a good one, but, Excel, when that first came out, all the accountants had to learn how to use it. They didn't have to know how it worked. They just had to know how to use it. So, yeah, I can see the parallels, definitely. Let's talk about leadership then. First question for you on that one. What is the biggest leadership lesson you've learned in your career so far?
That's a great question. I think the biggest leadership lesson that I've learned is really how to empower your team, how to take a step back and trust that they know what they're doing and align around a North Star. And I think the way to do that tactically is to not micromanage. It's to hire well and to not micromanage. You need to trust your team members. You need to know that if you are aligned around the North Star, that they should be able to understand what work needs to be done across different areas, not just the task that's assigned to them, but also tasks that they can see just hanging around in the company. And so I think the better job you can do of cultivating that empowerment and independence on a team, the more optimal results you'll see. I think that is a hard thing to do. And so, but if you can do it well, I think you'll see a lot of gains.
It always makes me smile when somebody says, don't micromanage, because it's top of my pet peeves for leadership is micromanagement.
It doesn't work as a leadership style. You should never micromanage. And I understand where the temptation comes from. I feel like, especially as a small business owner or as a founder, everything makes a difference. And so you just want to feel like you're in control because so much is out of your control. But that's why it's so important to hire well, because you need to know that you need to trust the team you've built.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people struggle with letting go as well, particularly when they're doing it for the first time. It's you spent your entire career up until that point doing the work yourself, and now suddenly you have to not do it yourself and just help someone else do it, but not get in their way. And
it's hard. And it took me a little while to understand how to do it. Like, I definitely think earlier on I micromanaged more, and I've realized like that doesn't work. It doesn't help at all. And it's not conducive to long-term goals. And you really need to be thinking at a long-term time horizon. I also think it's really important as a leader to speak last, to really allow the rest of the team to provide feedback first. I heard this analogy recently about how as a leader, as a manager, you have a gun on the table and you might not use the gun, but it is there always, which I know is like a terrible analogy. But the point is that you have there's this power dynamic there, and it's always going to be there, and you can never, there's nothing you can say that will remove it. And so it's really important that you let everyone else talk first, speak first, collaborate first, allow other people to collaborate without you before you step in.
Yeah, I get where the analogy comes from, but yeah, it's quite a scary way of putting it, isn't it?
Yeah, the imagery is very intense.
Yeah. I mean, it's slightly similar to one of the things that Simon Sinek says about leaders eat last. And I think actually there's a lot of things that leaders need to do last. Most things, in fact, with the exception of when there's something risky that needs to be done, or there's some sort of danger in whatever sense that is, at which point I think the leader has to go first. But yeah, it's a good lesson to bear in mind, I think, is that you always put your people before yourself.
Definitely.
Although, again, I mean, that's been contentious on occasion as well. There's a whole thing around the leader still needs to look after themselves before they can look after anyone else. And so, yeah, it gets complicated again, doesn't it?
I mean, every situation is different, but I think, any leader should put their team before themselves when it comes to what you're doing. That's how you build trust, and trust is how you build a long-term successful company. Obviously, if the company is going downhill and you really need to make cuts, then sacrifices have to be made. That's a different question. But in general, like, the leader needs to put their team, because that's how you build your foundation. I saw this great video recently. I don't know if you've seen this video about how someone is dancing in the park and they look absolutely insane, and they don't look not insane until they have their first follower, and their first follower, who's also dancing insane with them, starts the movement of having more people to join. Because when you're alone, yours is insane. But if you build the team around you, then you have something that's moving forward, that's creating a movement. It's a great video. I will send it to you.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I'd be good to see it. But yeah, it's a good metaphor as well, though, isn't it? Because that is basically what a leader is when they're on their own. They're not a leader. They're just a bit of a lunatic. Yeah. In the nicest possible way. Yeah, I mean, the leader's nothing without the team. Random tangent question for you then. Future of work is a great buzz phrase, isn't it, at the moment? Really like the direction is going. You see some of the pushback, though, like the return to office is a big one, isn't it? And
yes.
Yeah, I mean, it does make you wonder how it's all going to turn out.
It's surprising because I do think like more and more, it depends. Obviously, not every company can be fully remote. There are some companies that you need to, of course, be in person for, but it depends on the job and the role. And if it's a fully software driven company, I question whether you're more productive in office. It's nice to have a place where people can go into office when they need a change of pace, but does it help to be there 5 days a week? I don't think so.
I'm with you on that one. So particularly, I mean, any office-based job. But, I mean, even though thinking about, say, the Agile Manifesto, and that's very big in software, I know, and one of the key principles of that is that face-to-face is always better. But maybe we need to be reassessing now in the post-COVID world what face-to-face actually means, because I would say this right now is face-to-face.
And it's an interaction that we couldn't have had like 10 years ago, really, not at this level of quality. And I agree. I think it is really just redefining what is face-to-face, what is synchronous communication, and then what is possible even with asynchronous communication. Our team uses Loom like crazy. We're always recording videos and sending messages back and forth. And I think it works really well. And in some ways, it's even better because sometimes I'll send the same video to 10 people and be like, okay, that just saved me a ton of time instead of having that conversation 10 times.
Also, they can watch it more than once.
Exactly.
So if the phone rang or you weren't paying attention for whatever reason, you haven't missed the conversation. Yeah, you can just go and do it again.
I think it is like we're in a very exciting time in redefining what is collaboration look like, and what does asynchronous collaboration looks like. Because I think that really democratizes opportunities around the world.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a financial opportunity for the more canny companies as well, because you can offshore quite easily. You can save on your labor costs. You can
no building overhead or overhead. It is a lot more cost efficient in many ways.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, if you don't need to have the office, then you've saved yourself 5-6 figures a month, maybe just like that. So yeah, I'm all for it. Yeah, I'm definitely biased, but I'm all for it.
I do miss like having like an opportunity to like have a change of pace. I sometimes go into a WeWork for the day because I just want to like work somewhere that is not my home. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I just want to see other people and like dress up and go get coffee. So I understand wanting the diversity of experiences, but that's why I think it's only opening up opportunities for cool co-working spaces, and not necessarily just mingling with people who are at your own company, but mingling across companies or industries. So I definitely think it's changing how we think about what is the workday and what does the workday look like and who we work with.
I think you're right. Yeah. And I'm the same, but I think, again, you know, the canny ones will be building those kind of things in as well. So yeah, I mean, I work on my own now. I don't have people working for or with me really, apart from clients. But if I were to do it again, I think there would be every couple of weeks, at least once a month, everyone would meet up. We'll go and do a co-working space. We'll spend the day there, and then we'll go and have a social in the evening, something like that. Because yeah, I agree. I never would have said it when I was an employee, which tells you about where I worked and how I enjoyed that, perhaps. But I think it is important, isn't it?
Yeah, I definitely think it's super important. I also think it's easier to want to socialize with your coworkers when it is not something that you're forced to do, and it's something that you aren't really like. You're not seeing your coworkers in that capacity every day, and so when you do go out to it, it's more of an intentional experience. And I think in general, everyone is leaning more towards curating intentional experiences with everything that they do.
Definitely, yeah. And I think, I mean, the other aspect of it, of course, is back in the day when we were all in the office and we had no choice about it.
Yeah.
That kind of sense of forced fun.
Yes.
And the same rule for everyone. Like, everyone has to go to the same thing and you will enjoy it. Like, even if you're an introvert and it's the worst possible thing for you, or you're neurodivergent and it's a really unpleasant situation or context for you to be in, any of that didn't matter back then. Whereas now I think we've got that flexibility. We can cater to different needs and what works best for different people as individuals, rather than just having a blanket rule for everyone and no complaints, or your anti-team.
Right. Oh, yes. I remember those days. No, I agree. I think we have such a great opportunity now to focus on the individual and like what they need.
I think that's going to be the difference between success and failure for companies in the future, to be honest. I think the AI thing is there now. There's nothing we can do about that one way or the other. I think it's going to be how you leverage that experience for the team.
Definitely. And AI is just a tool. Another maybe scary analogy that someone told me is that AI is like fire. You can use it to heat up your house or burn it down. And it's really about how you use it. So, yeah.
It reminds me of that film I watched recently. I can't remember the name of it now. The Creator. Have you seen that?
No, I'm going to look into it.
Okay, I don't want to spoil it for you, but one of the premise at the beginning is that AI tries to wipe out humanity. It gets control of the nuclear codes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of the burn the house down problem, isn't it?
It is. So it's hard to know how to like have governance and regulation around it. And it's very top of mind, of course, today.
Yeah, definitely. Next question then. What has been your best experience of being led?
Oh, that's a great question. My best experience of being led. So I've been doing this for a while. So I'm like, in a way, a lot of my investors are kind of leading me as well. But I think in general, it comes back to the same qualities that I mentioned, because I think I took them from leaders in my life. It's very much being able to understand what is the North Star at any given point, to always have clarity on like what are the goals and the vision, and then to feel empowered to do whatever I need to do to make that happen within my role. And I think really feeling empowered, not feeling micromanaged, and having a resource to collaborate with whenever I'm stuck or need help, that has made my best jobs my best jobs.
I won't ask you to name names.
I've been in every experience that I've had, from Microsoft to internships, that I've seen that across different roles.
It's funny when I ask that question, a lot of people struggle with it. Whereas if you ask the opposite question, like, what's the worst experience you've had of leadership? Almost everyone immediately knows, right, I've got an answer and it's a good one.
Right. And I think it's really a shame, because I do think like leadership is such a skill, and I don't think enough managers are taught it early on. And it's hard to learn. And I think, to be a good manager, you need to be actively seeking out management books, tutorials, classes. Like, you should be trying to be a better manager every day. And I don't think most managers do that. They're just like, okay, I guess I'm managing now. And they think it's like an extension of their old job, but it's actually a completely new job, that requires a lot of time and effort. And, to the question of like, what is the worst management experience, which I know you didn't ask, but I will say like all of the worst experiences I've had, they always dealt with some form of micromanagement, some form of lack of resources or a lack of opportunity to collaborate. And then, not giving me the space to speak up or to talk back or to ask questions. And I feel like, every worst experience kind of like falls under one of those buckets.
I think, if we remove kind of the outliers of literal bullying and harassment and that kind of stuff, I think most of the stories, what it will come down to is just not feeling listened to. Micromanagement, lack of trust, no respect at work, not being paid what you're worth, not feeling valued, all of that. It really just comes down to the boss isn't listening to your opinion, to your viewpoint, to your experience. And of course, the opposite of that is mostly what good leadership is about. Listen.
Yeah. No, it's so true.
And I totally agree as well about early managers. That's why I'm here. That's why this podcast exists, is to try and help people solve that problem when they encounter it. And on that subject then, what would be your best piece of advice for a new leader or first-time manager?
To look up resources to help you when you get stuck, and to like even proactively do that, and to understand your team. Actually, this is a peer manager that really inspired me the other day. They were reading this book called The Four Tendencies, and they started reading it because they wanted to understand a different member on their team who didn't seem motivated by the same things that other team members were motivated by. And so as a manager, she was trying to understand, how do I motivate this person? Like, how do I help them in the role that they're going to do? And she started looking up resources to understand how he thinks, and then how she can adapt her management style for him. And I was so inspired by that, because I was like, that is proactive management right there. And that is what a good manager should be doing. It's not about how they can change to better enable you. It's how can you change to better empower them.
Oh, I love that as well. Yeah, I think so much of leadership is contextual and situational. And I think to do it well in this day and age, particularly in tech industries, you've got to be adaptable.
Definitely.
Really, it's not even about the industry, is it? I just say tech and industry because we're talking about tech, but people are all different. Everyone is an individual. Everyone will react slightly differently to the same situation. And so if you can't adapt to that and identify what leadership is required by each individual you're leading, I think you're gonna struggle. You're gonna hit a roadblock pretty quick.
Yeah, it's not one formula fits all, or the idiom there.
Indeed. What would be the one thing that you wish you'd known before you started your career?
To be willing to take risks and to feel comfortable with the uncomfortable. So I think I very much went on a career path of like, okay, this is the next milestone. This is the next milestone, always knowing the roadmap ahead of me. And I think the founder's journey has been particularly difficult in the beginning because I was so uncomfortable with the unknown unknowns. And really it never becomes comfortable, but you become comfortable with the feeling of discomfort. And I think that's something people should practice earlier on. I actually think children should practice that. I think at 5 or 6 years old, you should, the earlier it's muscle, the earlier you start working and training that muscle of feeling prepared in the unknown. I think that is a great life skill. And then the second thing is like this, I don't know why when I was a kid, I had this idea, okay, one day you'll have learned everything you have to learn and then you'll be like set for life. And that's just not true. And honestly, it would be so sad if it was true. And I feel like that's the other big thing that the founder's journey has taught me is that I think some of the best wins, especially early on, and you should celebrate all the small wins that you have because it really will keep you going. But some of the best small wins are really this idea of like how much I learned today. Like, what did I like accomplish and learn and how did I grow today? And I think that growth mindset and celebrating it has really been something else that I've really loved learning in this journey.
I think the first one is interesting as well because it's resiliency, isn't it, effectively? And I think, again, you know, the elephant in the room that is COVID, I think a lot of people have been forced to become a lot more comfortable with uncertainty in their future. Whereas, you know, back when we first entered the workplace, it was, you've got to know where your paycheck is coming from. You've got to have 100% confidence that it's going to be there the next 12 months at least. Otherwise, everything feels like it's falling apart. Whereas now, you know.
And like people are so much more open to taking risks with their work, with their paycheck. And I think that is like something that is great to be comfortable with, especially earlier on in life.
Yeah. Lifelong learning as well, fully behind that. I think if there's ever a point in my life where I'll be okay with feeling I've learned everything I need to know, it will be the day before the end.
Yeah.
So if I have that last day of feeling, well, I'm done. That's cool.
Yeah. Satisfied.
Leadership Heroes.
Okay, I've only got one question left, which must mean time's flying, which must mean we're having fun.
Yes, definitely.
My favourite question usually as well, it's called Leadership Heroes. So the question is, if you had to pick one person, and it can be anyone you like, alive, dead, past, present, real, fictitious, who in your opinion would perfectly embody leadership, who would that person be and why?
I honestly wish I knew more leaders. I wish there were like a bunch just coming to mind right now. And I really don't know. I would like to say Satya Nadella, which I feel like is kind of a cop-out, but because I worked at Microsoft, but I actually think he's done an amazing job. When I joined Microsoft, the stock was at $40, less than that, and it's 10x in 10 years. And really the strategy that he has shown in terms of acquiring companies, in terms of growing the cloud business, it really feels like he's been a step ahead every time. And I think it's really hard to take a big company and keep it innovative and keep it at the forefront. Jensen Huang at NVIDIA also. I think he has really great talks and policies, and the way he talks about his own founder's journey and the resiliency there. He also just seems like he really cares about everyone who works at his company. He was very, I think, open to like the future of work and these changes that are happening and providing very like diverse policies. So those are both people today that I think are doing really great jobs at their respective companies. Historically, I think building something from scratch is always so inspiring, and to grow and scale it and to create a legacy. And so I think Coco Chanel has like her origin stories to where she went. And I know there's some problematic things in her history, but I also think as a woman at that time, she really had the odds stacked against her and was so resilient and so gritty and built such a lasting brand. And I think that's also very inspirational to me.
Okay, 3 then. So if you had to pick one, I don't know if this influenced your decision, but we've had Satya Nadella before. We haven't the others. So which one would it be if you had to pick one of them?
I guess I would pick Coco Chanel because it's the full journey from nothing to an empire.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. I mean, they're all good choices, definitely. And actually, I've been recommended to read Satya Nadella's book, and I've not done it yet. It's on my list. I need to get to it because apparently it's really good. I quite like him out of those three because he, from what I understand so far anyway, having not read his book yet, he's much more people focused and servant leader kind of approach than his predecessor. And the contrast within the company, and you can probably speak to this better than anyone since you worked there, was quite profound.
I agree with that. I really do think he's such a great leader.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, sorry to put you on the spot there, but
no, it's a great question. I wish that there were more leaders. Like to the conversation we were having earlier. I think if you had asked me 10 years ago, I probably would have said Elon Musk. And then I thought it and I was like, no, but I really like the idea of a leader who has a large vision and wants to really impact society for the best. I just don't think he is that, nor maybe he ever was.
He's very divisive now, isn't he? I know what you mean though. I think I'm half and half with him these days. Because I know what you mean, and part of leadership is about having that grand vision and inspiring people to follow you, to work towards it, and then ultimately achieving it, hopefully. And I think he's got a pretty decent track record of being able to do that, at least. I can't speak to what he's like to work for.
Either, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what happened with Twitter, though, and again, we're back to the pandemic and the future of work conversation, aren't we? Because before he bought Twitter, it was, I would say, probably leading the way in terms of what the future of work was going to look like. They had a complete flexible working policy. Everyone could work from home if they wanted to all the time. And then the second he took over, he was like, no, none of that. Everyone back in the office or you're fired. And
I know.
Yeah.
Crazy. So I would say he's there now, but I really do like some of the principles that he seemed to represent earlier on in his career.
Yeah, I do find the whole SpaceX philosophy and the reason for doing the company, and I mean, that's it's an attempt, it's an aspiration towards leading all of humanity, isn't it? I mean, you've got to admire the ambition of that, if nothing else.
Definitely.
And ultimately, he's going to be right, isn't he? If we stay as a one planet species, we're over sooner or later. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one. This is why I'm on the fence with him.
Yeah, me too. I get it. I think you do have to measure how much harm you're doing at any given point. And I do think he's doing a lot of harm right now in a more democratic sense than anything else.
Well, yeah, there's that aspect of it as well, of course. Let's not get into the conversation about billionaires and their power, though. I mean, we don't have time for that.
That's the problem with, I think, all leaders. I think it is so hard to find a leader that is not problematic. Although I will say Satya Nadella and Jensen, I don't think are problematic leaders. I think they've done a really good job. Yeah,
it reminds me of that sort of comic book cliche, doesn't it? About you either die a hero or you.
I should judge that because I definitely think it applies to Elon.
Yeah, I don't know. He's still got time. He could bring it back.
Still got time.
Lovely. Well, let's start that conversation before we get ourselves into a lawsuit.
I agree.
Yeah, Denzil, it's been lovely talking to you today. Really enjoyed this conversation. Some really big topics we tried to tackle there in not a lot of time as well. So, yeah, thank you. Last thing I'll ask you is if any of the listeners would like to learn more about you or your company, would you like to point them towards your website where they can learn more?
Yes. Please come visit Smarty at www.smarty.ai. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Denzil Eden. I'm always happy to talk to aspiring founders, or if you want a personalized onboarding for Smarty, happy to walk you through it. Please reach out.
Lovely. And I'll pop that link in the episode notes as well so everyone can find it easily. And that's it. That's all we've got time for. Thank you again so much for your time and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Likewise. Thank you so much for your time, Denzil. It was great meeting you. Loved that conversation as well. Listener, I'm sure you want to know more. I'm sure you're curious about Smarty. So do visit smarty.ai. I've popped the link in the episode description for you as well. Sign up, have a play with it, see if it's useful for you. And I'm sure Denzil would love to have some feedback from you as well. Thank you so much for joining us today, for listening, for watching if you're with us on YouTube. Great to have you here. Every listen, every view, every review is appreciated. Thank you so much for your support. Podcast wouldn't be here without you. So yeah, thank you again. I hope you'll join me again next week. We have 2 episodes next week. One of them is a bonus because we're hitting 100 episodes. So I had to do something a bit different to mark the occasion. It also seems quite relevant to today's conversation. Why? Because it's going to be a bit of a different format. Instead of me having a guest and interviewing them, I am going to be interviewed. And guess who's interviewing me? You'll never guess because it's ChatGPT. Ooh, interesting. Maybe. I'm not going to spoil it, but I might be getting some unusual, unexpected questions. So you'll just have to tune in. We're going to be releasing that on Monday, the 25th of March. So only a few days to go. I hope you'll give that a listen and do please let me know what you think of it because it's a bit of an experiment, a bit random, and I'd love to know what you think. And then on Wednesday, we return to our regularly scheduled programming with guest Donna Dube. She's the host of the CEO Amplify podcast. She's also a business growth strategist and operations director. So she has some great insights to share from a interesting and varied career and some very pertinent thoughts, experiences, insights on leadership. So I hope you'll join us then. Until then, have a great rest of your week and be a leader, not a boss.